and welcome to the Keys to Therapy. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about questions that you should ask when interviewing for a therapy job. So there's lots of different settings. I've covered that in a different video. Lots of different settings that new therapists in general can work. And even though there's a lot of changes that go on between like the roles you'll have in each setting, there's still a basic list of questions that you should ask during a job interview. So a lot of times when people are thinking about a job interview and they're preparing for it, they tend to think about what's going to be asked of them. What questions are they going to ask me? Like, what answers should I give? And you're really more focused on maybe like impressing the employer or making sure your answers are really good and that you look and feel confident. And all of that's fine. Like, all of that is part of the process, and that's totally acceptable. The other part I think a lot of people forget is that the interview process is a two-way street. You're interviewing them as well. You want to know more about what the place is going to be like before you sign up. And this was something I saw a lot in my program, especially towards the end as people were getting more anxious and I guess kind of like scared and nervous and a little excited about what this job process would be like. Like, what's our first job going to be when we graduate? And most of us just wanted a job. Like, let me just get a job. Let me just have some experience. Let me get in a place that I can do my hours and get my full license. So, that is fine. Again, we all need a job. We all got to start somewhere. But new therapists, especially residents, provisionally licensed associates, whatever they call it in your state, starting out, you tend to get taken advantage of a lot more than you would if you were later on in your career and maybe more seasoned. So you want to know that you are asking the right questions and getting a feel for the place so that you can hopefully get ahead of being burned out or potentially being used, or just be able to identify some red flags possibly from the jump before you completely sign on. Now, of course, there's no way to know all of those things until you're actually in the agency or in the hospital or in whatever facility it's going to be. But you may be able to screen out a couple things from the get-go. Also, something that I've personally found that has helped is when you are asking questions and you're coming in very, not just confident, but assertive in the job interview process, you're setting the tone with your employer or potential employer about who you are. So I could think of one job interview in particular where I came in very assertive and I was like, here's what I'm looking for. Here's what I need. Now, mind you, this was like 8 years after I graduated. So it took me a bit to get to the point that I was there, which is why I want you guys to get there sooner. So you don't have to put up with some of the stuff I did. But, if when I came into that job interview, I was like, here's what I'm looking for and here's what I want. Didn't explain why, didn't but this or that. No, I was just like, this is what I'm looking for and this is what I want at this point in my career. And I got it. I found out later that even though other people had asked for similar stuff, they didn't get it. And they'd been there longer. So I do think some of that was because of how I asked for it. And the fact that I asked questions, not just about like what was happening right then, but what could happen in that job in the future. So I think sometimes you coming in that way sets a tone that you're not going to put up with a lot of crap and that you are coming at this job very critically and like you want to know more about it and not just be like, yes, sure, whatever you need. Yeah, I'll sign up. Yeah, I'll do those days. I'll do those hours. Because sometimes if certain employers see that you are kind of desperate, they may latch on to that. And next thing you know, you are being taken advantage of. So if you can come into that interview process and have some questions handy, things that you want to ask them, I think you're going to look more knowledgeable. You're going to look more confident. You are going to be letting them know that you're interviewing them as well. And I know that might feel kind of intimidating to some people, which is why I wanted to go over the questions to ask, because these are things that you need to know before you sign up for someplace and you get all your paperwork going with your licensing board and you're like, here's where I'm working, here's my supervisor. You want to have a better idea of what you're signing up for before you do all that stuff and then have to change it later. So now, as far as questions that you should ask as the interviewee, the first one would be, how many clients a day am I expected to see? Or how many clients a week am I expected to see? A lot of places when you're first starting out, especially like community mental health, I'm sure other places do too, but I can speak on that one personally, is they have an expectation for what you're supposed to do. And a lot of times they, especially like the higher ups more so, are concerned about productivity. That's it. Not necessarily like the job that you're doing, how well you're doing, if they like you or not. Like, it tends to not be about that, because these people may not even know you or ever meet you. They want to know about productivity. How many clients are we getting in and out? How many, what's our billing looking like? How many people are you able to bill for? Because then that translates to money for them. So I saw this with the military too. It became very much so about productivity. And you want to know what those expectations are before you go into it. So I know in community mental health, I want to say out of the 40 hours that I worked, I think it was like 25 hours a week was the expectation for clinical hours. So they were like, we expect you to schedule at least 25 clients. Now, that may seem low to some people, but there was like other things. Like almost everybody had a group on top of the individual hours that you had to do. And there was like meetings and trainings, and that also accounted for a lot of no-shows. Because sometimes in community mental health, people have so many things going on. Other people may not be as committed to treatment. Some other people are sort of like court ordered to be there, so they may not always be as consistent because they don't love it. You are going to find that there's more no-shows. But if the expectation for me was 25 a week, what I would have to do is at the end of every day, print out my schedule for the day and attach it to all my notes for the day and put it in the box of the records person. And then at the beginning of every week, so say on like Monday morning, I would come in, and in my mailbox would be a printout of my schedule from the week, and it would say like 20 out of the 40 hours were used for clients, like basically you're -5. And that's how it was every week. I didn't know to ask about productivity beforehand, and I didn't also know like how many people 25 clients would actually be, and getting that buy-in from 25 people to consistently come in. And actually it's more than that, because some are like every other week. So yeah, so definitely ask like how many clients a day or a week are you expected to see? Because if the number to you sounds outrageous, if they're like, oh, well, you have to have like 35 clients out of your 40 hours, like that's a lot of people, and that's potentially a recipe for burnout. So definitely ask what those expectations are, so you can decide if this is the type of place that you'd want to work. Another question, probably the biggest question to ask, is what's the pay? Like, how much are you getting paid? And when you are getting paid that much, what else is included? So when you ask like, what is the salary here? Then ask, are you salary or hourly? Some places, say private practice, for example, you only get paid hourly. They're only going to pay you for the clients that you see. Some other places, more like bigger agencies or hospitals, are going to pay you salary. So you're going to get paid for the 40 hours. But sometimes with that, you may be working more. They may expect you to like stay late for this one client, or, change up your hours or whatever else. And then suddenly now you're working 43 and not the 40, but you're getting paid for the 40. Where if you were hourly and you were doing extra work, you would get paid for that time. So there's pros and cons to both. I think sometimes in the beginning, salary may be better just because you're guaranteed a paycheck. And when you're not typically making that much in the beginning of your career anyway, knowing what that amount is going to be can make a big difference in how you're budgeting for your life. So definitely ask them, is it salary or hourly? And then what's the pay look like? And on top of that, how often are raises given? Are you evaluated every 6 months? And then they potentially, give you a raise if they feel it's warranted. Is it like a yearly thing? I know when I did community mental health, it was yearly. So every year at your like year mark anniversary, they would let you know, like, okay, you are making $1,200 more in the next year or something like that. So yeah, definitely ask about that. How often are raises given? Because you want to know that you're going to have some room to grow in this position. And maybe if it's not even you growing, it's your bank account growing. Like you need to know about that. You need to. So ask about that. Also ask with the benefits package, what does that include? Does that include insurance? And if so, what kinds? Does that include supervision? So, and that's kind of its own question, but yeah, you want to know when they're saying, oh, because a lot of these listings will say stuff like 401k, health insurance, stuff like that. But when you look at the insurance, they don't pay, the company might not pay into it. They may just have a plan that you have to buy into, and now you're paying the full cost, and it might actually be cheaper for you to do like the marketplace insurance than it is to go through the company. Sometimes they'll say like 401k offered, but they don't match it. So it's just you putting money in a retirement account, which you could do on your own without the job. So really dig into what those benefits look like and make sure that that's something that you're willing to accept. Another question, and this one was a big one for me, but I didn't know it starting out, why it's included in here, but do I get admin time? If you were expected to see 35 clients a week, right? What is your admin time? Are those extra 5 hours like built-in admin time, and you get 1 hour each day of the week to catch up on notes and stuff like that? Because there is so much paperwork that goes into this field. So much, especially when it's a new client. You have to do their entire intake. So not only did you read all their paperwork and consents, but now you're typing all of that up. You're creating an entire treatment plan. You, even with follow-up clients, you're writing all of their progress notes. You're potentially updating treatment plans. You have phone calls and emails and different things that you have to do. And you want to know if there's built-in admin time. When I worked in community mental health, there was no admin time. Lunch was your admin time, essentially. I remember I had asked, because I wanted a half-hour lunch. I would have rather like left half hour early and had a half-hour lunch and been gone sooner or came in later or whatever it was. There came a point that they mandated that you take an hour lunch. And so that was annoying. But I was like, okay, then if I'm here for an hour, now it's turned into like my admin time. And it shouldn't be. But that's the way it goes sometimes, and that's annoying. I didn't know that from the get-go, that there wasn't built-in admin time. And like I said, I didn't even know that was something I should ask for. So when my next job with the military, I asked about admin time, and there was built-in admin time. So I think they said you got like 7 hours a week or something like that, from what I remember. I think it was like 7 hours a week of admin time. So you could decide, do you want it to be the first hour, the last hour? Do you want maybe Monday and Friday? You're doing 2 hours. Maybe it's like Wednesday and Friday that you're doing the extra, you're adding those extra hours to have 2 hours each day to like catch up and then end your week. So I know that I added like an hour every afternoon, the last hour of the day, to finish whatever notes, emails, anything I needed to do before I went home, because I did not want to come in the next day and have more stuff to catch up with. And so maybe like Wednesdays, I think I added a second hour to that day. So it'd be something like attached to lunch maybe. So I had just like a longer break from people. And that's when I would, update treatment plans that were due, send emails, any like trainings or stuff that was required, do that then. So definitely ask, like, do I get separate admin time? Is that built into my schedule? Because you're going to need that. Paperwork's a lot, especially in the beginning as you're learning how to do it all and finding your rhythm and figuring out how to write notes and all of that stuff. Another thing to ask is, do you have like a set time for like case consultations with staff? Especially if you're newer in the field, you're really going to want to have that time where you can staff cases with people and hear what they're doing and get some feedback and just like broaden your view of what other people are doing and how their cases are looking, or what strategies they're using, or which books they're recommending, or things along those lines. It's very helpful, again, especially in the beginning, to have those case consultations. So ask if that's something that the place you're interviewing at offers. Do they do like monthly case consultations? Is there like every other week? Is there like a drop-in one? Like figuring out if that's offered and deciding if that's important to you or not. Another one, similar lines, is supervision included in your salary? So I know in community mental health, my supervision was on site and it was included. So the person in charge of mental health, because it was like a mental health side and a substance abuse side, the person in charge of the mental health side was my direct supervisor, and then also my clinical supervisor. So I would meet with her an hour every week, and that was included in my pay. So even though my pay in community mental health starting out was $35,000 a year, not great, and I lived by myself, and it was a lot of money that I owed and not enough coming in. especially after just graduating. Even though I was getting paid $35,000, I was not having to pay for supervision. And some supervisors, if you paid outside of your agency, like you actually had to pay for it, they can charge anywhere from, I've seen like $50 an hour to like $200 an hour for supervision. And you typically have to meet with someone weekly for at least 2 years. So that really adds up over time. So even though maybe I wasn't making as much as I'd hoped to start out with, because I made that with just a bachelor's in psychology, knowing that I was saving thousands if I took a job that didn't provide supervision, I had to go outside, that made me feel a little bit better about taking it. Plus I knew it would be short term. So, that's something to consider as well. Is supervision included in your salary? Because you need to know, are you having to now use whatever salary you've got to pay for outside supervision? Because you might not be able to accept a job that does that, or the salary may be high, but they don't provide supervision. So now you're spending more money out of pocket for it. So absolutely in the beginning stages of your career, as you need the supervision, definitely ask about that. One of the top questions to ask, actually. Another question you can ask is, how many people are in a similar role to me? So, like I said, the agency I was at to start out with had substance abuse and mental health. How many other mental health therapists are there here? What populations do they see? What all do they do? So you want to get an idea of like what this team looks like. Are you the only person on the team? Is there multiple people here that you could potentially like rely on, share supplies with, like stuff like that? I think it's very important to get a picture of like what the agency looks like and what your support team is going to be like, because you're going to want that too, again, especially in the beginning. Another question, and they may not answer this, but you can decide if you want to ask it or not, is what is turnover like? Is the place you're going into, does it have a high turnover rate? Because that doesn't look good for a place. It doesn't look great for like an agency if they constantly have new staff, because it's telling you that either staff are getting burned out and or they're not getting paid enough. They may be getting taken advantage of. It may be a toxic work environment. So I would want to know what the turnover looks like as well. And again, they may not answer that, or you may not feel super comfortable asking that in the beginning. But just kind of keep that in mind as something that you may want to touch on at some point. Another thing would be, are there any CEU opportunities here? So some jobs will provide you with CEU opportunities. Everybody needs those to maintain their licenses. So whether you're a new therapist or not, if you're going to start working at a place, you want to know what options you have when it comes to CEUs. Do they provide them? I know when I worked in community mental health, they would do once a month like lunch and learns. So you would get like one CEU, and for an hour, somebody would come in and give a talk or presentation on a topic, and they'd provide lunch. And so I knew at least like 1 hour a month I would be getting those CEUs that would add up over time. You also want to know, like, do they give you any kind of stipend for trainings? So I know when I worked at a group private practice, you would get like $350 a year in order to like pay for some trainings and stuff you want to do. If you've ever seen any of like the big trainings like EMDR, brain spotting, or any of that stuff could be close to $1,000, if not more, depending on how extensive it is. And that's not even including like travel and stuff like that if it's not in your city or it's not virtual. So you need to know, is there any kind of stipend given for trainings? Do they offer training opportunities there? And another question, and I didn't know to ask this either in the beginning, is if you do a training on a work day, will they count that as a work day? Or will they consider that part of your vacation time? So when I worked with the military, they had a thing, like a policy, I guess, at the contract company I was with, where if you did a training on a work day and you could prove that you did it, you showed your registration for it, and then you showed that you went to it, your certificate, and you submitted that with your like some special sheet or something, not PTO, but some kind of sheet like that, they would count it as a work day and they would pay you for that day. So that was great. It didn't work on the weekends. If I took like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday training, someone told me it did, and then they took the money back because somebody else said you couldn't. So this is why I ask this question now and why I want you guys to ask this. because I didn't know and it turned into a huge thing. So if you do a training that happens to be in the middle of the week, virtual, in person, whatever it is, does that still count as a work day? So keep that in mind too. So then that'll help you budget your PTO days if you need to. And the last question to make sure that you ask in a job interview would be, what's your leadership style? Talk to the person who's interviewing you, especially if they're going to be your boss, and just ask, like, I'm just curious, what's your leadership style like? Are you more hands-on? Are you fairly hands-off? Are you available if I have questions? Just things like that, because you need to know, is this a micromanager type person? Not that they'd admit that in the interview, but based off their answers, you can kind of start to pick up on what kind of person they are. So if they say, oh, my leadership style, I'm very hands-on. I'm in your schedule every week. I'm like counting up your hours. I want to make sure that you're reaching productivity. Red flag. So that sounds a bit like a hands-on, I don't know, overbearing type of leadership style. If they're like, oh, I'm pretty hands-off, but I make sure that I'm available to you if you need something. So if they almost have like office hours, if you can have like a set supervision schedule too, which would be nice because you can plan your schedule around that, and that they're carving out time for you consistently every week for supervision, like then they're prioritizing it. So you want to know, like, what kind of leader is this person? Again, you may not get like a fully 100% honest, genuine answer, but I think it's absolutely worth asking, because we can kind of gauge who they are, how they work, by not only how they're asking you questions in the interview, but how they're responding to your questions, especially that one. They may be kind of triggered if they've been told that they have issues as a leader, and then now you're asking them about it. But don't let that deter you from it. I think that's a very, very good question to ask, and something that you're going to want to know if you're going to potentially be working with these people for a couple years. If you're going to be meeting with this person as a supervisor, one-on-one, if their license is to some extent in your hands, or in their hands, you're going to want to get an idea of how they work and who they are. So I know that that's a lot of questions to ask. So I made a handout for you guys, and I'm going to link it below so you can have like a cheat sheet that you can bring with you to interviews, that you can just kind of have on hand, that you can practice, whatever. You can add your own questions to it. You can cross out ones that I mentioned that you don't care about. But I think that there's just a lot of info here, and I want you guys to be as prepared as possible. Like I said throughout this video, there was a lot that I didn't know to ask, and nobody in grad school, in my program at least, prepped for after grad school. No one talked to me about how to do interviews. No one talked to me about what my value would be to an agency. Nobody mentioned at all about what I should be doing as far as like places to look for or what questions I should be asking. So I wanted to put this one out there, so hopefully everybody, not only the new ones, but even established therapists who weren't given that foundation, that everyone can have some sort of cheat sheet of knowing like what to ask and what you also deserve to know. You deserve to know this. An interview is a two-way street. So yes, you may really want the job or really need the job, so you don't even care. Like whatever it is, you got to do it. You have to take it. But I think they may respect you more if during the interview you're coming at them with some questions, obviously in like a nice, professional, polite way. But I think that's also going to show you as being somebody who's more no nonsense, and you are prepared and you're ready. And those are good skills. Those are things most people would think were good skills. And if the person who's interviewing you does not like that you're asking so many questions or that you're expecting these details from them, that in itself is a huge red flag that may not be the place for you. So just kind of keep that in mind. But make sure that you are taking care of yourself, because the whole interview process is stressful. If you're still in school, you're preparing to graduate soon, like totally get it. It's scary. If you've been in the field for a little bit and you're going to take a leap and join a group practice or switch to a hospital or a different agency or whatever else, I'm hoping that this is helpful for you as well, because again, I wasn't taught this. I'm assuming a lot of you out there weren't either. So good luck on your journeys. If you want to continue to follow my videos, then just subscribe below and stick with me, and I'll see you next episode. Thanks.